John Gotti. June 10, 2002. John Gotti died in a prison hospital, alone, powerless, and abandoned by the Mafia. This is how the Teflon Don really ended. John Gotti ran the Gambino family differently from the bosses before him. He liked attention. He wore expensive suits, smiled for cameras, and spoke openly outside courtrooms. The media called him the Dapper Don. After several trials in the 1980s ended without convictions, he became known as the Teflon Don. That visibility became his weakness. The FBI placed listening devices in locations tied to Gotti. His conversations were recorded. On tape, he criticized his own men and spoke freely about murders. In 1991, his underboss, Salvatore Gravano, known as Sammy the Bull, heard those recordings. Soon after, Gravano turned informant. He testified about murders and explained how the Gambino family operated. In 1992, Gotti was found guilty of 5 murders and major crimes. He was sentenced to life in prison without parole and sent to a federal supermax facility. He spent most days alone, locked in his cell for 23 hours. By the late 1990s, his power was gone. In 1998, he was diagnosed with throat cancer. On June 10, 2002, he died in a prison hospital in Missouri. About 300 people attended his funeral. No Mafia bosses showed up. Bugsy Siegel. June 20, 1947. Bugsy Siegel was shot through a window in Beverly Hills and died on a sofa. This is how Hollywood's favorite gangster was killed. Bugsy Siegel was one of the most feared mobsters of the 1930s and 1940s. Violent, flashy, and unpredictable, he ran prostitution and gambling rackets and mixed openly with movie stars. Unlike other gangsters, he lived in the spotlight. When the heat grew too intense on the East Coast, the mob sent him west. Siegel tried to reinvent himself in Las Vegas. In 1945, he took control of the Flamingo, betting the desert would make him rich. He poured millions into it. Costs spiraled. When it opened in 1946, the casino was unfinished and bleeding money. The mob believed he was stealing. By 1947, trust was gone. On the night of June 20th, Siegel was sitting on a sofa in his girlfriend Virginia Hill's Beverly Hills home, reading the newspaper. Just before 11 p.m., gunshots tore through the window. He was hit in the head and chest. One bullet destroyed his left eye. He died within minutes. He was 41. No one was ever charged. The next day, Siegel's partners walked into the Flamingo and took control. Business as usual. Albert Anastasia. They called him the Lord High Executioner. On October 25, 1957, execution finally came for Albert Anastasia. It happened in a barber chair in broad daylight. Albert Anastasia was one of the most feared men in the American Mafia. Known as the Mad Hatter, he helped run Murder Incorporated, a network of contract killers responsible for hundreds of murders. He later became boss of what would be known as the Gambino crime family and controlled key parts of New York's waterfront. But Anastasia's power made him dangerous to everyone around him. Other bosses saw him as violent and unpredictable. Rumors spread that he was selling Mafia memberships and losing money gambling. Even men close to him grew uneasy. Quietly, alliances shifted. Carlo Gambino waited. On the morning of October 25, 1957, Anastasia entered the barber shop at the Park Sheraton Hotel in Manhattan. He sat down for a shave. His driver was not present. 2 masked men rushed in and shoved the barber aside. Gunshots rang out. Anastasia lunged forward, swinging at reflections in the mirror. The bullets did not stop until he fell dead on the floor. No one was ever charged. Soon after, Carlo Gambino took control. Anastasia was buried in Brooklyn. Vito Genovese. February 14, 1969. Vito Genovese suffered a fatal heart attack inside prison. The man who ruled through fear died under guard. Vito Genovese, one of the most feared mafia bosses in New York, worked with Lucky Luciano and helped build the modern mafia. Over time, he took control of the crime family that would later be named after him. In the late 1950s, Genovese reached the top. He forced Frank Costello into retirement, ordered the murder of Albert Anastasia, and tried to claim the title of Boss of Bosses. To secure his power, he called a national mafia meeting in 1957. Police raided it. Dozens of mob leaders were exposed. His authority was damaged overnight. In 1959, Genovese's enemies finally struck. He was convicted on drug charges and sent to prison for 15 years. Behind bars, fear followed him. One of his own men, Joe Valachi, thought Genovese wanted him dead. Valachi panicked, killed the wrong inmate, and turned informant, dragging the mafia into the open. Genovese remained in prison. On February 14, 1969, he suffered a heart attack inside a federal hospital. He was buried quietly. The boss who ruled through fear died locked away, powerless, and surrounded by enemies. Carmine Galante, July 12, 1979. Carmine Galante was shot dead in a Brooklyn restaurant, executed in public, without warning. Carmine Galante was not a large man, but he was deeply feared. He stood just 5'5", rarely smiled, and was known for a cold, unsettling stare. Police called him cruel and unpredictable. While in prison in the early 1930s, doctors officially labeled him a psychopath. Galante rose through the Bonanno family using violence and the drug trade. Nicknamed the Cigar, he helped control major heroin operations linked to Sicily during the 1950s and 60s. After serving a long prison sentence, he was released in 1974 and quickly seized power while official boss Philip Rusty Rastelli was in prison. Once in control, Galante refused to share drug profits with other families. This made him a threat. The commission decided he had gone too far. On July 12, 1979, Galante was eating lunch at Joe and Mary's Italian-American restaurant in Brooklyn. 3 masked gunmen walked in and opened fire at close range. He was killed instantly. A cigar was still in his mouth. His death sent a clear message. No mafia boss was untouchable. Joe Masseria. April 15, 1931. Joe Masseria was shot to death while playing cards, set up by the man he trusted most. This killing reshaped the mafia forever. Joe Masseria, known as Joe the Boss, ran one of the most powerful mafia groups in New York. By the late 1920s, he controlled what later became the Genovese crime family. He demanded money from other gangs and ruled through fear. His hunger for power helped ignite the Castellamarese War, a brutal fight for control of the city. As the war dragged on, Masseria weakened. Rivals gained ground, and many inside his circle saw him as greedy and outdated. His top lieutenant, Lucky Luciano, was losing faith. Behind Masseria's back, Luciano secretly planned with his enemy, Salvatore Maranzano. On April 15, 1931, Masseria went to Nuova Villa Tamaro, a restaurant on Coney Island. He sat down to play cards. Mid-game, Luciano stood up and walked away. Seconds later, gunmen rushed in. Masseria was shot in the head, back, and chest. He fell over the table and died instantly. The killers escaped and nobody talked about it again. With Masseria dead, the war ended and power shifted fast. The Mafia entered a new era, one built on betrayal, not loyalty. Al Capone. January 25, 1947. When Al Capone died, he did not know who he was. The man who ruled Chicago could not recognize the world around him. Fear did not kill him. His mind did. Al Capone rose during Prohibition, when illegal alcohol flooded Chicago. He moved fast, crushed rivals, and ruled the city through fear. By the late 1920s, he controlled most of Chicago's underworld. His last real enemy was George Bugs Moran. In February 1929, Capone's men, dressed as police officers, entered a North Side garage. They lined up 7 of Moran's men and gunned them down with machine guns. Moran survived only because he arrived late. The St. Valentine's Day massacre made Capone untouchable, or so it seemed. The massacre changed everything. Public outrage exploded. The government stopped chasing him for murder and followed his money instead. In 1931, Capone was convicted of tax evasion and sentenced to 11 years in prison. In prison, his health deteriorated. Untreated syphilis damaged his brain. He became confused, childlike, and weak. When he was released, The feared boss was gone. In January 1947, after a stroke and pneumonia, Al Capone died in his Florida home at 48 years old.